Hi, welcome to another episode of History in 7 Facts. In this show, we'll explore some of the most interesting things that we know or not know about our own past. In the second chapter of this series, we're going to discover some of the lost ancient worlds to see if we can find some interesting things you may not know. Today we'll tackle another subject I bet you never considered: how malaria influenced the downfall of the Roman Empire. At the beginning of the 5th century, the Roman Empire was already failing. The Huns, Visigoths, Saxons and other barbaric tribes were constantly putting pressure on the borders. The religious disputes between the Greek Orthodox eastern half and the Latin west were already present at the time, way before the official split took place in 1054 AD. Thus, there was no longer a political cohesion within the empire. Corruption was also a major problem, and the occasional civil wars didn't help either. So there was an explosive cocktail of several major problems that severely weakened Rome, thus exposing it to outside threats that were in theory inferior. But when imagining this downfall, don't think of it as a sudden and unexpected event. In fact, it was a very slow process that took centuries and ended with the deposition of the last Western Emperor Romulus Augustulus in 467 AD and the crowning of the former barbaric soldier Odoacer as king of Italy. This event also marked the beginning of the Middle Ages in Western Europe. But there was another outsider that had a major contribution to the disappearance of the greatest European empire, the Anopheles mosquito. Its name comes from Greek and it means useless, but its presence in the empire led to a weakened Roman army that could no longer fight effectively against invaders. The Anopheles is a genus of mosquitoes with 460 species, out of which about 40 are malaria-carrying insects. To this day, they are responsible to about 500,000 malaria-related deaths every year. But even 2,000 years ago, the Romans knew about this disease. However, they had no effective way to prevent or kill it. They even figured out that swamps and still waters are somehow the cause of the spread of malaria and other diseases. But they didn't make the connection between those swamps and the mosquitoes. Instead, most believed that the stench of these waters, the miasma, was the actual carrier of diseases, and those unpleasant smells were the reason why you felt sick. The idea of miasma, or bad-smelling air, as the cause of diseases actually persisted all the way through the 18th century. Still, ancient Romans knew that some areas are more dangerous than others, and those who could would retreat to their villas in the mountains in the warm rainy seasons. But there is no such thing as miasma-related diseases. No. The reason is that warm still waters are literally the breeding ground of mosquitoes and other insects. It's where they lay their eggs and spread throughout entire regions. So moving to cool mountainous areas where most waters are rapid cold rivers flowing downwards meant less swamps, aka less mosquitoes. There are no historical records showing large outbreaks of malaria and an increase in deaths caused by it within the Roman Empire. But there's more than one type of malaria out there, and some forms can be treated just by treating the high fever. So many adults with a strong immunity could survive an infection, like for instance Julius Caesar himself, and afterwards become immune to that specific type of malaria. And when enough individuals within a population gain immunity, those specific protective genes will spread. And lo behold, today's population of Italy and other Mediterranean nations do have specific genes that make them immune to certain types of malaria. Thanks to genetic studies, we can now analyze how this happened. When comparing the European and African genes that offer immunity to the Plasmodium falciparum malaria, scientists have found that this type of immunity started out in Africa and then spread to Europe and Southern Asia. The European version of the gene offers immunity to a lesser degree than the original African version. But from Iberia to Anatolia, there's actually a mix of both the European gene and the African one, which suggests that in antiquity there might have been outbreaks of more severe types of malaria throughout the entire Roman Empire. In 1907, William Henry Samuel Jones, a British professor at Cambridge, proposed an outlandish theory. Malaria caused the downfall of the Roman Empire. After studying countless ancient documents, he noticed that from one point the hot lowlands of southern Italy stopped sending fresh troops into the Roman legions. Most of the new recruits came from the mountainous areas. And by the time the Western Empire fell, the vast majority of the Roman army was Germanic. Jones concluded that starting from the 2nd century AD, outbreaks of malaria increased, leaving less able bodies in communities, thus decreasing the number of potential soldiers. He also suggested that malaria was brought over to Europe by Hannibal with his countless troops and animals in the devastating Second Punic War. Recent scientific discoveries seem to confirm Professor Jones's theory. The sudden appearance of a new variety of malaria, one for which the Romans didn't have an immunity, could have had devastating effects. Plasmodium falciparum is the most violent form of the disease, and it seems to be the prime suspect. Although this microbe is associated with tropical climates, and particularly with the African continent, we have found proof that Plasmodium falciparum did enter Europe, and it did so during the age of ancient Rome. This isn't a far-fetched idea, since the Romans had very well established trade routes with both Asia and Northern Africa. So the likelihood that some of those trade ships also brought malaria-carrying mosquitoes is extremely high. Amazingly, even though there are no historical records to pinpoint a malaria epidemic, scientists did find archaeological evidence of major outbreaks. An ancient cemetery 70 kilometers north of Rome seems to offer undeniable proof that there was at least one malaria outbreak around 450 AD. In one of the tombs, there were no less than 47 remains of infants, most of them newborns and prematurely born babies. The bodies were all buried within a period of a few days to a couple of weeks, indicating the presence of an epidemic. Malaria causes miscarriage or premature birth. The cemetery was near the swampy areas of the Tiber River, and the tombs contained seeds, proof that the burials took place in the summer. And summer is the only season when malaria strikes. But the most convincing evidence is the presence of DNA from the microbe Plasmodium falciparum in the bones of the infants. So a new form of malaria seems to have hit ancient Rome, and the effects would have been devastating. Instead of treating just the fever and healing fast, the infected probably died within a few hours after the first symptoms showed. Those that survived were too weak to be a productive member of the community, and many probably died of other diseases like tuberculosis due to a weakened immunity. The infection could have caused typhus-like symptoms too, like diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, and rashes. The way this type of malaria manifests itself could have easily confused the people of the time, thinking the disease was in fact a variety of other diseases, thus never making the connection between the symptoms and the actual disease. hence the lack of historical records. The bones from the cemetery near Rome seem to confirm that Plasmodium falciparum did infect the Italian peninsula right around the time ancient Rome was in a free fall. And if the mosquitoes managed to reach Rome, the southern regions would have surely been devastated by epidemics, and they probably didn't even realize it. The swampy, warm areas of the south were the perfect breeding ground for the Anopheles mosquito. For an already crippled empire with a failing economy, weak political strength, and an increasingly inefficient military, these hidden malaria outbreaks were probably the decisive blow. Thank you for watching this episode of 7 Facts. I hope this was interesting and informative, and maybe it even inspired you to look into it further on your own. If you liked this video, please thumbs up and subscribe. While you're downstairs, let me know what you think about this video. Please consider visiting my Patreon page and become a patron. The link is in the description. I hope to see you next time. Bye.